Okay, so in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to draw maybe like a hairpiece or a bow or whatever asset it is you want to add to your model to kind of decorate your models. So I usually use a software called Clip Studio Paint. You can use a free software like GIMP. You can use Photoshop. You do have to buy Clip Studio, but it's one of the best softwares I've ever used for drawing, so I would recommend it. So we're gonna do that. And let me move my model over so you can see my layers. Um, just so that you kind of know what I'm doing. Okay. So we could start with something basic like a bow. Let's draw a bow. I'm gonna use the symmetrical ruler down here. I'm gonna do symmetrical ruler and just kind of drag it in the middle of the canvas, and then when I draw, I can just kind of draw on one side and it will automatically draw on the other. Excuse me. My pigeon is causing all sorts of chaos. So let's create just like a basic little, let's just do a bow tie. Oh, and I usually draw using vector layers, which are a little different than raster layers. Here, let me explain that. A raster layer, this is what a rasterized image looks like. You can see the edges are kind of blurred and faded, whereas with pixel art, it's like sharp on the edge. And then here's the same thing, but I'll draw it as a vector in like a purple color. So like, at a glance, these look the same. The difference is when I'm using a vector layer, which is this button here, and it shows that it's a vector here. A vector is infinitely scalable, and I can control the points. For example, if I click on this part with my object selection tool, nothing happens. But if I click on this one, I can see all of the different points that this line is made up of, and I can readjust it as needed. You can also use another tool down here, this one, the correct line, to control these points or simplify it. So I can just kind of go over it and tell it to simplify it. And then I can kind of like, you know, make the curves a little more perfect if I want it to be like really nice and smooth. Another major difference between the rasterized and vector layer is, so this, let me just write raster layer, vector layer. Is what's handy is you can scale a vector layer infinitely, whereas you really can't do that with a raster layer. So like, oh no, I drew this too tiny. I wanted it to be like as big as this canvas. I can scale this up. And like from a distance they both look fine, but when you look up close, look at how like crunchy this is. Like that looks very low res, it doesn't look very nice, whereas this one, the edge is still nice and sharp because it's considered because it's on a vector layer. Another fun thing with vector layers is I can use this tool here. I can select it with my object selection tool, and then down here I can even specify that I want it to be thinner or thicker. So that's why I pretty much almost exclusively only draw on vector layers. The only times I use raster layers are when I am like filling color behind something. So that's kind of the basics on a rasterized layer versus a vector layer. If you're using Photoshop or another software that doesn't have vector layers, that's fine too. Just make sure that you draw your image at like a decent size. I would say at least 800 pixels. You can always shrink it smaller, but scaling it up bigger, sometimes it looks bad. So let's go ahead and start drawing. And I'm going to do it on my vector layer, and I'm going to go ahead and put my symmetry ruler on that vector layer. And let's draw a little bow tie. Okay, So this is my line art layer. I like to color on a separate layer, so I'm going to create a new rasterized layer. This is a rasterized layer. I'm going to use this for the fill color. And this layer I'm going to keep as the line art. And we're going to use our bucket tool over here. And you can adjust how much of a gap it's going to close, but since my line art is fully closed, it doesn't matter. And I'm going to fill it with red. And then I'm going to go in with my lasso tool, or just my pen, and color in these little specks. And then I'm going to do another layer. I'm going to do this one as the shadow layer. Shadow. And I like to just draw with the lasso tool, but you can just draw with the pen tool like this. And let's do the shadows. I usually use a multiply layer, and I'll explain what that is. So let me just, oh, but if I want my shadows to be symmetrical, I can just take this symmetrical ruler, drag it down here, and now when I draw on this layer, that will get mirrored. So let's just do that real quick. And you might be wondering, why are you shading in purple? That's why I like to use multiply layers, just because it kind of helps make it easier to kind of pick what color you want the shadow to be. But first, before I do that, you'll notice I've colored out of the lines. Yes, I can go through and like meticulously erase all of this, or I can right click on this and say that it is a clipping layer. Where is it? It should say, there's a little symbol here. Let me drag this over. Oh wait, hold on, let me move my screen over. There we go. This one here says create layer mask. That's not what I want. I want a clipping layer. Merge. Where's my clipping layers? Where is my clipping mask? Ah, okay, here it is. This one up here. This is clip to layer below. And what that does is it kind of like hides everything that bleeds out of this fill. So like if I move the fill over, it will only show that, or I can move the shadow separately. Yeah, and then I like to just change my layers to multiply. What that does is that just takes the purple and kind of just like darkens it onto the red, and this is where I like to kind of experiment with different colors. We can try like a really light blue, and we can fill it with that. See, that looks a little better. You can do orange, but that's so saturated you can't really see it. We can do this orange. I can do just like a lighter color, or you can lower the opacity over here. I'm gonna do kind of a dark purple. There we go. And let's add some highlights. So I'm gonna do another clipping layer. I'm gonna copy this red, and I'm just gonna do like a lighter pink. And let's do it with like a soft airbrush. Oh, and let me move my ruler onto that layer, and we'll just kind of like make it soft. And I mean, you can use whatever style you like. There's like hard edge cell shading. There is a way to also make the eraser mirror. I'm just too lazy to do it right now, even though it's literally just changing the one setting. I'll just erase that with the selection tool. There we go. So kind of have a little bow tie now. I kind of want to make that a little softer here, so I'm going to use a soft eraser. Just kind of soften this. That way we've got a little bit of hard edge and then a little bit of soft. Okay. And what's fun with multiply is if I decided I wanted to add little polka dots to this, you can just draw the dots on. Okay, so that's good enough. Oh, and let me set my shadow to overlay or screen. Okay. So now we have our little bow, and I'm going to put all of these in a folder. And then I like to hold Control and then click the folder icon. That just makes a selection around my object. I'm going to expand that selection by... Oh god, my bird has shoved my mouse so far away. Let's expand that selection by like 10 pixels. And then I'm going to do crop. It's going to crop to that selection. That way there's not a bunch of empty space around my bow. And I'm going to hide or just delete this layer. And I haven't saved the file yet, so there's a little star key there. If you ever want to be able to change the colors later, make sure you save it as a clip file. And we can just name this bow. But for importing this into whether it's other art softwares or you want to put it on your VTuber model, you need to export it as a PNG. That way, all of this checkerboard area will be transparent. So we're just going to name it bow, and we're just going to save it as a PNG. We're going to hit OK. And now I'll show you where to load in and attach those files.